What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Indirect changes are a huge part of balance in League and often get less attention than the more direct changes that occur in the patch notes. And honestly, I'd say that you can argue that indirect changes shift the meta more frequently than direct changes to champions. Let's get started. What I mean by an indirect change is a change that occurs as a result of a change to something else. For example, if Nidalee has the damage on her Q lowered in a patch, that is a direct nerf to Nidalee, as it impacts her kit in a concrete way. But if a champion who counters Nidalee in the game gets nerfed, that is an indirect buff to Nidalee, because she now fares better against the meta since one of her counter picks is no longer as strong as the other meta champions. Now, League of Legends operates on a system that is called perfect imbalance. This is where a game has a bunch of mechanics, all of which are slightly imbalanced in some way. This imbalance introduces a lot of choices in terms of strategy and results in a metagame where counterplay is extremely relevant, and a large majority of champions are balanced despite having imbalanced mechanics due to the fact that there are mechanics that counter those champions. The imbalances themselves usually aren't too crazy, and so overall the system works quite well most of the time. This kind of system causes indirect changes to be extremely relevant, since counterplay and counter mechanics are such relevant factors to determine how well a specific champion might perform in the current meta. And so an indirect change can make or break a champion. An indirect buff can be huge, as can an indirect nerf, so this is why we see champions fall in and out of the meta without actually receiving any changes to their kit whatsoever. Because at the end of the day, the strength of a champion is all relative. It's all about how well they perform versus the rest of the other champions, how well they counter other champions, and how easily they get countered by other champions. And so indirect changes have a very real effect on a champion. The best example of a champion who benefited from an indirect change I can think of has to be Morgana support. If you played back in Season 3, Morgana support was considered to be a complete troll pick, and rightfully so, as she was quite a poor champion for the support role at that time, since she stacked up poorly against the utility support meta of champions like Sona, Soraka, Janna, and even some things like Lux, all really high range poke supports of which Morgana does quite poorly against. Then, during the preseason to Season 4, the new support gold items came out that improved the income of support champions by a lot. And with those support item changes, engaged supports that are good at starting fights got a huge buff. Champions like Leona, Alistar, Taric, and Thresh, who was newly released, became the dominant meta, and Morgana support does an absolutely fantastic job of countering those engaged support champions due to her black shield shutting out their engages completely. In addition, Morgana got a lot of gold too from the new gold items, with her W being able to proc spell Thief's Edge like crazy, and so overall, Morgana support went from a troll pick to what was one of, if not the best support champion in the game for quite some time, despite not receiving any actual changes to her kit as a champion, and even eventually received quite a few nerfs due to her power as a support champion. With this indirect buff, suddenly Morgana support was an incredible counter pick and destroyed the support meta with the mechanics she brought to the table, and this was all due to the indirect buffs she received from the support item changes, causing the meta to shift to engage heavy support champions. And at the same time, Morgana support becoming a meta pick was a huge indirect nerf to the engaged supports of the meta at the time, and as a result we started to see some utility supports becoming popular again, while the engaged supports took a hit due to the relevance of Morgana as a support pick in that meta. This is just one example, of course, but time and time again we've seen champions become strong or fall out of the meta completely in this exact same way, and that's the true power of an indirect change. And so overall, indirect changes as a whole play a huge part in what is flavor of the month, as well as making champions fall out of the meta, since League of Legends as a whole is completely balanced around counterplay mechanics, and indirect changes affect those respective counterplay mechanics so heavily, and it results in some really impactful changes that might not seem that relevant at first. And that just about wraps it up. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to tap that like button to help support me, as well as you can subscribe for some more awesome content in the future. And definitely check out some of my other videos on the screen too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.